Hey guys, once again welcome back to Horology Biology. My Enicar newbioids, we have a special one today. This is an Enicar Super Divette MKII that I had just sent in. It's that good. The quality of this watch is so much better than I expected, but there are problems. It's not running perfectly, and most importantly, the bezel is not turning correctly. Now, it could be one of two things. It's either a problem with the gear mechanism or the crystal is not correct. Now, if I'm honest, by first glance, I'm much more warming towards the crystal because these crystals are special and the one that's on it does not look special. So this Super Divette MKII is a 36mm watch. It has two crowns, obviously, being a diver watch, one for operating the timing mechanisms and the date, and the other for operating the bezel. It has a EPSA super compressor case back. It has a marvelous inner bezel, as you can see. And what I really like about this MKII is that it has a cushion case, meaning that when you have a strap on it, it's really pushed up tight to the case with no gaps. Looks super sexy, super nice. Okay guys, I'm gonna put this on the bench, strip it down, the usual shenanigans. Let's get on with it. Hey guys, so let's get down to this strip down. Let's completely break down this Super Divette into all the pieces so that we can get it ready for cleaning. First, obviously, we need to remove the movement from the case. So that's exactly what I'm going to do now. I always find it easier to use a ball for these Enicar cases so you don't want to scratch the case back. I always remove the rotor as well before I remove the movement. It's a delicate item and it's good to also get that out of the way before you actually take it out of the watch. Two case clamps, get those removed as well, and then we can remove the crown and the winding stem. And what a dial, seriously guys. All original, super matte black, beautiful typefaces, no damage whatsoever. Remarkable dial. I was shocked when I saw it underneath that disgusting crystal that was on it. Absolutely beautiful. So it's held on with two dial feet screws. You just want to remove those from each side of the movement, and then you can gently just lift off the dial with a screwdriver. And my advice is put that away somewhere safe. You can get these little dial cases that I've got. You can just pop it in there and close it down, put the hands underneath, and then just put it away and forget about it so that you don't need to stress about it. When you got a dial in that kind of condition, you do not want to take any chances. No sir. So that's the dial out, and now we can continue to break down this watch. Take off the hour wheel, and now I'm going to take off the cannon pinion with a pair of Presto tools. That's friction fit, so it comes off quite easily. You just lift it off. So now I'm going to remove these two plates which are covering the date wheel or the date disc. Held together by two little screws each. They are super small, these screws. It's a beautiful caliber, the AR-165. And also what's interesting about this, I was working on a 161 recently, which is a hand winder. And you can actually tell that when Enicar made these in production, the main plates, they're all the same throughout the family. Because even on the 161, it had the area where the automatic works go, which is underneath the main barrel, sorry, the barrel where the mainspring is. And it's interesting because those parts are on the main plate, even though it's a hand wind. It's there because they've obviously used the same main plate for the automatic versions of the 160 family. I find it quite interesting that they did that, but obviously it was a production cost issue, I should imagine, and it makes sense. So I've flipped the movement back over now, and I'm getting the balance out of the way because that's also a super delicate part and you want to get that out of the way. After that, I'm just making sure that I'm removing any tension that's in the watch by Just applying a little bit of pressure on the click, and then you can gently let the crown run through your fingers to unwind it basically. Going on to the MotionWorks and just removing the crown wheels. There's 3. I'm not sure if they're actually all called crown wheels, but they work in principle as a crown wheel. So there's 3 of these in place, and one of them is under tension on that little spring. Well, I say little spring, it's actually quite long if you look at it. Now I'm just removing that now. It's actually quite a beefy spring, but it's not very thick, as I say, you know, so the tension on it's quite relaxed. It's not a very rigid spring. So then I can remove the barrel bridge, and then I'm removing the pallet's bridge. Sorry, the pallet cock, it's only 1 screw, and of course the pallet's out as well. So now that those things are out of the way, you can move on to the train of wheels bridge, checking that and putting that to one side, and then we can remove the wheels underneath, the center wheel, and the rest of the wheels, of course. It's important that when you take them out, you do check the pivots, just to make sure that they're not too worn, or if they're going to need replacing. So that's the barrel out, and that's a bridge which is covered in the center wheel, sorry. And then the escape wheel. So this little wheel here, this is what's sending power from the automatic works down to a small ratchet wheel that's underneath the main barrel. And this is the part that I was talking about earlier on the 161 caliber, which is a hand winder, and it actually has that area on the main plate where that wheel can go, even though it doesn't exist on the 161 because it's a hand winder and it's not needed. So we flip the movement back over and can continue to break down the keyless works. So that's the yoke and the yoke spring going out. And now I can take out the winding stem with the crown and the setting lever spring. Again, it's another movement that I really like because it's not got a setting lever screw, it's just a push spring, similar to some of the Omega models. Enicar also have used the screws as well as push methods on quite a few of their calibers. So the movement has been completely stripped, so we put the balance back on to keep it safe before it goes into the cleaning machine. It's the best way to do it, I've explained that before. It just keeps it safe and of course it gets it clean. So now I'm just breaking down the automatic works. So there's 2 wheels underneath and a main wheel, and these 2 little wheels, which I believe are reversing wheels, I might be wrong with that, they're held under tension by 1 little plate, and that little plate always drives me insane. You cannot put it, you can only put it back on one way, and of course every time I put it back on I always put it back on the wrong way. It will fit both ways without any issue, but there's only one way that's the correct way. And there's the little ratchet wheel that is underneath the mainspring barrel for the automatic works, sending power to it. We pop open the barrel and then we can of course take out the arbor and the mainspring. Now the easiest way with the mainspring, just open it up a little bit with a screwdriver so that you can get your finger or your thumb underneath it, and then basically just unwind it between your thumbs. It's the easiest way to do it, and it's the safest as well because there's a lot of tension in there. So now before we go into the cleaning, we will do the pre-cleaning. So this is what they call pegging the jewels, where you use a nice piece of pegwood and you just scrape away any dry oil that's on the jewels. The cleaning machine is really good, but it's good to give it a pre-clean so that you know it's been done properly. So I like to do that on all the jewel parts, so on bridges and on the main plate, etc. And just get that ready for the cleaning machine. So guys, we have completely stripped down this watch, we have pre-cleaned it, and we have also run it through the Elmer cleaning machine, and now we are ready to rebuild the watch. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to prepare the barrel, and what I'm using here is something that is literally worth more than gold in weight. It's a special lubricant called chrono grease, and it's only used on automatic watches. It's a braking grease, so that because the mainspring doesn't lock inside the barrel, it keeps on turning and turning. You want to delay this, and you obviously want to make sure that it's lubricated correctly. So this is why we use this stuff called chrono grease. It literally just looks like black tar. So once the mainspring is in, then we literally use this little tool to click the lid back on, and then that's set. Applying a little bit of 1300 to the arbor so that it's lubricated, and this is on the bottom of the mainspring barrel because now I'm going to add on that little ratchet wheel, which is for the automatic works. It sends power from the automatic works. The automatic works, sorry, sends power to this, and then this obviously winds the mainspring. Similar to the ratchet wheel that's on the top, it has a square hole. I actually don't know if this is actually called a ratchet wheel or if it's like an automatic ratchet wheel. I'm not sure. Maybe you guys can let me know in the comments because I'm not 100% sure what the name of it is. So now that that barrel is ready and prepared, the next thing that I like to do at this stage is, rather than remove the balance, I like to remove the capstones and clean those. The one on top of the balance and the one on the dial side of the movement. Now these little capstones are held together under tension by the Enicar block setting, and that's got two little levers that you want to just nip from side to side. You can do that with a pair of tweezers and then lift it up. You don't want to lift it too far because you can break it, and it is a pain to have it refitted. To put a new one in, it really is a pain. So I've cleaned the top capstone, and I'm just putting a little bit of 9010 onto this. And then I put it back together and I put it back into the watch. They can be seriously fiddly, these things. They're so small. As you can see, I am wrestling with this thing, trying to turn it over. So then we just pop it back into its house and flip the Enicar block back down, and then just close that up. Guys, if you're liking my videos, I would really appreciate a subscribe. Really appreciate it if you could like the video as well. Definitely help me grow my channel. It also helps you guys as well, because then you know when I've got more videos coming out, because you will get a notification in your YouTube settings. So it's a win for both of us. So now I'm just doing the other one on the dial side. I do put them into a fixer drop treatment, and the reason I do that is quite simply because it adds a little microfilm layer onto the capstone, so that when I apply the 9010 oil, it doesn't run anywhere. It just keeps it in place, and you only need to add a little tiny bit of the oil, but it keeps it held in place, so that when I put it back together, it creates like a little bubble of oil just where the pivot goes in. As I mentioned earlier, these things, they're so small. So sometimes you can end up wrestling around with them a little bit. So now that's done, we just pop that back into the movement. Same method as the one on the balance. We just close that up and secure it in place. And now of course we can continue to rebuild this stunning AR-165 caliber. I mentioned it before in the Sherpa guide rebuild video. A lot of the parts in each of the families of the Enicars are interchangeable. So if you have issues with, say, a 165, a lot of the parts from like a 167, for example, they'll work within this model as well. So I'm just adding in the center wheel and then the little bridge that supports that, and then I can add the barrel. So that's the barrel in, and the barrel bridge on top is held in with 2 screws. Just checking to make sure that there's not really any play, and it seems to be okay and everything's engaging correctly as it should. So I can pop the screws back in and secure that in place. So now we move on to the trainer wheels, popping in the escape wheel. You have to be careful with this one because there's not like a full amount of room for you to pop it in because that bridge is in the way, but there is obviously a gap. So you just have to kind of gently just ease it in. I mean, I've worked on so many Enicars now, I'm just used to it. A little bit of 1300 on this post, and then that wheel will just slide straight through the center. And now the tricky bit comes of lining up the train of wheel bridge, making sure that all the pivots line up correctly with their jewel holes. You do not want to screw this down without making sure that you've lined everything up and that everything runs freely. Otherwise you will break something. It will happen. It's always best just to secure it with a little bit of pegwood. If you use your finger, it's going to be too forceful and it's too risky to damage something, so it's easy just to use a little piece of pegwood just to keep everything in place. Once it's done and you know everything's good, you can screw it down fully. So now I'm just starting to do a little bit of oiling, so a little bit of 1300 to the top of the arbor where the ratchet wheel's going to go, and I'm also going to oil the train of wheel bridge, the train of wheels. I use a combination of 90-10 and then I use 1300 on the center. So now I'm adding in the click spring and the click. It's a very, very small click on this model. The click spring I really do like because you don't have to apply pressure to get it in. It literally just sits in a groove on top of the bridge. And so it's not something that's going to run away from you, which it's a nice feature. That click is just held in with 1 screw, so you just need to tighten that up. And now I can add the ratchet wheel on top, and that will obviously make sure that that long click spring is held in place as well and it's not going to go anywhere. The ratchet wheel has a square hole, so you have to make sure that you align it up correctly with the top of the arbor. I mean, it's not very difficult, it's just going to go one way or not. So now I can add in these 3 crown wheels. I mean, they work in principle as a crown wheel. And the last one that I've just put in, it's held under just a little bit of tension from that spring. And then there's a bridge that sits on top, which is held in with 2 screws. So as you can see, what I'm doing is I just pull the spring away, otherwise the wheel will keep moving underneath. So I just want to remove the tension from the spring, and then I can put the bridge on a lot easier and just screw it in place, and then I just let the spring back and everything's connected correctly. So now I can move on to the pallet forks. The pallet forks also get treatment in fix-a-drop because you need to oil the exit fork. So as explained in previous videos, I do that in 3 stages under the microscope. I add a little bit of oil, which is this special oil here. It's only for the pallet fork jewels. And I add a little bit, and then I manually adjust the pallet forks 5 times, and I repeat the process 3 in total, so that a little bit of oil is transferred to every tooth on the escape wheel. So just drying off the pallet forks with the blower. And then I just fit that into the watch and then secure it down with the pallet cock. So guys, I don't know if you noticed my Instagram post the other day, but I got a nice batch of new Enicar car stickers in. I'm gonna start giving those away over the next few months on my Horology Biology YouTube channel. So bear this in mind. I'm not sure how I'm gonna do it yet, but I have quite a few, and they're not things that I'm selling, they're things that I am going to give away. So maybe I will just come up with some kind of incentive of how I'm going to do this. So stay tuned in regards to that, it will be interesting. And they're super nice stickers, they look great on a car. So we have got the watch running. The balance has been put back in and it's fired up straight away, which is really good. Secured by 1 screw. And I must admit, it's very easy to regulate these Enicar watches, mainly because in regards to adjusting the collet, which is that basically lives underneath the balance. It's attached to the balance staff, and you can get what they call beat error on a watch. And in order to adjust that, you need to basically adjust the impulse jewel, which is on the collet. And on the Enicar watches, it's also something that's on other watches as well. You can actually adjust that by pushing it, the regulator, on top of the balance. So some watches don't have that option. Then you have to do it manually, which is a lot more time consuming. So I flipped the watch over, and now I'm going to basically do the dial side. So that's going to consist of the keyless works. So I've added the winding pinion and the sliding pinion, and now I'm just adding a little bit of grease also to the winding stem, and I'm just going to fit that in place. Now this little lever, this little lever operates the quick set date mechanism, and it lives underneath the this setting lever spring. So on this model, when you pull the crown out, to set the time, and you can set the date by basically winding the watch while the hands are out. You can keep going round and round, but if you pull the crown out again and then push it in, the date will quick set, and you can just keep on push pull, and the date will keep changing. So it obviously makes it a lot quicker. A lot of other watches, they basically, you can quick set date change between 8 and 12. So you go to 12, it'll change, wind the hands back to 8 p.m. and then go back to 12 again. But with this particular model on the 165, as with other Enicar models, you can quick set it by just keep on pushing and pulling the crown. And this is the little tiny spring. This spring is so small, by the way. It is ridiculous how small it is. This lives just above the part I was telling you about that quick set changes the date. It is such a tiny little spring, and it's really thin as well. You can lose it very easily, and I'd rather not. So we're nearly getting there. As you can see, the minute wheel has been put in, the intermediate wheel has also been put in. Now I'm just fixing this with one screw, and then I need to apply some grease as well, and then the keyless works will be complete. Quick check to make sure everything's engaging, and that looks fine. A little bit of grease. And I say a little, but that's actually way too much. So I need to clean off that with some Rodico. I mean, it can happen that you can use too much, but I think what's most important is that you know exactly what you've done and then you basically clean it up afterwards. I mean, if you were to leave that, yeah, that would be a problem with the watch moving down the line. It would end up gunking and building up and being a big problem. So I'm applying a little bit of 1300 here now to these two wheels which operate the date change. And now this little lever, which is also held under tension by a hard spring. This is where the date flips over, as you can see with the little teeth on the date disc. Can be a little bit of a fiddly one, this one, so I like to put in at least one of the plates first to at least hold the date disc in place a little bit more than without. And these plates are each held in by two very tiny screws. I mean, look at them, you can hardly see them, they look like little ants. So that spring's been added, and now I can add the plate that lives on top of it. And that's basically securing the date disc, but at the same time also that spring that's underneath it as well, making sure that nothing can move around. You know, it never fails to amaze me, the craftsmanship and the work that must have gone into designing these movements. I mean, they are absolutely timeless. I mean, no pun intended, but they really are absolutely timeless. Now, just on the tip of the lever where it touches against the date disc, I add a tiny little bit of 1300, just a little bit of lubrication to help it turn around. Sometimes they can get a little stuck, so it's nice to add a little bit of lubrication to help it out. Finally, I just put on the hour wheel, and I like to check this now just to make sure that the date chip turns over, and there we can see that it is, which is nice. and that's the quick set date. So I take the hour wheel back off because I want to add a little bit of 1300 just to the cannon pinion. And I didn't do it before while I was testing the date mechanism. So I just pop the hour wheel back on, and then I just need to add the dial washer. And now we get to put on that super juicy dial. Seriously guys, this dial is nice. So like I said before, the dial is held in, it has two posts underneath the dial, and then you have two dial screws that fit into the side of the movement, and you just need to nip them up. You don't need to screw them up too tight, but just enough that it holds the dial in place and stops it from moving around. Quick check of the date. And then just cleaning off any dust from the dial itself. I mean, look at those loom dots. They have aged so nice, and they're so big and chunky still. So now I'm just rebuilding the automatic works. I add a little bit of grease to these two wheels, and then to the posts of them I add a little bit of 1300 before I rebuild them. And this is the part that I was telling you about that is my nemesis, seriously. For some reason, I most of the time put this in upside down. I don't know why I do it, but it happens. Did it happen this time? Yeah, of course it did. And once I'd finished the video, I basically took the automatic works off, opened it up, swapped it back to the correct way it should be, and then closed it back up again. Basically, if it's the wrong way round, this wheel that I'm adding now, it just won't engage with the other two wheels correctly. It will engage a bit, but you'll feel it immediately as soon as it's on the watch. When you wind it, you'll notice. So this bridge is held with two little screws again. I'm just popping those in and then screw them in place. Now I need to oil the underside of this. I'm using 9010 to the jewels. And now I can pop the automatic works, of course, onto the top of the movement. So I don't add a lot of pressure when I do this because I don't want to break the pivot or damage it. So the easiest way to do it is just to place it lightly on top and then wind the watch, and it will engage itself. Once you know it's engaged and the wheels are moving correctly, then you can screw it down, it's no problem. And what do you guys think to my nice ultra dive? It's been on my wrist a few days now, if I'm honest. Definitely got back into it, even if Ed Sheeran has one. It's not that I'm hating on Ed Sheeran, don't get me wrong, honestly. So a little 90-10 to the top jewels on top of this automatic works, and we are nearly there. So now that that's done, all we need to do now is set the hands on the watch. I'm using a Horotech hand punching tool. First, I put on the hour wheel, making sure that the date is at 12 o'clock. Sorry, making sure that the date is set to 12 o'clock, so that obviously the hand is in the right place. And then obviously moving on to the minute hand. Now it's important when you're doing these to make sure that you keep checking the hands so that the hands are not touching, because if they touch, they will stop the watch, and you don't want that. So every time I add a hand, I just give it a quick check and wind it and make sure that they're not touching each other anywhere on the watch. And once you're happy, then you can just continue with the other hands. Finally, we put on that super nice bright orange sweeper, and that just gets pressed in place. Now when I got this watch, the bezel was not turning at all. And under inspection, definitely the crystal was at fault. The crystal that was on this watch was not in the best condition, and most importantly, it was not the correct crystal at all for this watch. Whoever had put it on the watch obviously thought, oh, it fits, so that's it, it's great. No, not at all. These crystals are special, they look completely different, and they have a tension ring that's on the watch where it actually holds the bezel in place. So we can put the inner bezel into the watch, it just fits perfectly in there, and then I can press fit the new crystal onto the case. Making sure that the crystal is clean on the inside as well. I could do this afterwards because the movement's not in the watch yet. But these parts are not that easy to find, especially these crystals. Beautiful sharp edges to it, and it's really going to set this watch off. You'll see, it sets this watch off really nice. So that gets pressed on, and as you can see, we have a moving bezel, bi-directional, moving super nice. So the only thing that we've got to do now is just get this watch cased up. I've removed the old gasket from the case, I've cleaned up the case, so we're going to case it up and we're going to fit a new gasket as well. So obviously we've had to remove the crown and the winding stem, and then we simply just put the case over the movement and then turn it upside down, and then we put in the winding stem back in with the crown, and we put in the movement holder. And the movement holder is held in just by 2 screws with 2 little tabs, and they keep it secure and in place so that it doesn't rattle about inside the watch. Now, but as saying earlier, it has been a real pleasure to work on this watch. I'm sure the owner is going to be very happy. So new gasket, we're just lubricating that up with some gasket grease. It makes it easier to fit, and it also makes the gasket more supple, and it's good to make it more waterproof. And that just fits in on the back of the case. There's a special groove channel where it lives, and you just feed it in. And that should be good for another few years. These gaskets are strange. When they get old, they either do one of two things. They either turn rock solid, and they're an absolute nightmare to try and get out, or even worse, they melt. And I've never understood how or why they do that, but they literally turn into this horrible black goo. And that's even worse to get off because it just goes everywhere. So we are at the end. The very last thing that I add to the watch is the rotor, and that's literally just held in with one big screw. And once that's on, we just put the case on, and that's it. Just check that it's engaging, obviously. Put the case back on, bayonet fit in, so I use a ball for this, it's just easier. And that is it. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please smack a like on this. If you could subscribe to the channel as well, that would be super appreciated. And if you have any comments or suggestions for any other videos that you want to see from me, please let me know, feel free. So there we have it, guys, the Enicar Super Divette MKII with the AR-165 caliber. Absolutely stunning. Very happy with how this come out, and I'm pretty sure the owner is going to be over the moon with this because it's an absolute beauty of a watch. Okay guys, until next time,